Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. I'm going to give you 4 scenarios in which Biden could usher Kamala Harris into the presidency, into the White House, into the Oval Office. Listen, I don't put anything past the Democrat Party at this point in time. We've seen the craziest stuff ever. They are an authoritarian party. I don't believe they care about their voters. I don't think they care about people. Generally speaking, I think they care about power, and they will do whatever it takes to keep their reins on power. So stay tuned for some quick program messaging, and then I'm going to give you 4 scenarios in which Biden could usher Kamala Harris into the White House. Stay tuned. All right. Welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. You can go to thecarljacksonshow.com, Apple, Google, Spotify. Please subscribe to our Rumble or YouTube channel, The Carl Jackson Show on YouTube, and Rumble is where you can find us. I'm on all things social media, The Carl Jackson Show. Guys, I want you to feel inspired before we get into this dreadful scenario of how Kamala Harris could walk into the White House. Quite literally could walk into the White House. I talked to you yesterday about Joe Biden and how Joe Biden could conceivably win the Democratic primary. He could stave off all primary challengers. But if he does, what next? We all know that he's a dementia patient in the White House. So what if he opens the back door for Kamala Harris? So that's a pretty depressing thought. And since I've given you that very depressing thought, I do want to talk to you about the movie Pardoned by Grace. All right. So from the makers of Graham Family Films comes a powerful and inspiring true story that's going to touch your heart and renew your faith. Introducing Pardoned by Grace. It's the incredible journey of Scott Heiberger. He's played by actor Joey Lawrence, a convicted criminal turned prison minister who defies all the odds and receives an unlikely pardon to continue his ministry on the outside. Featuring Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter Michael W. Smith as Heiberger's pastor, Pardoned by Grace showcases the transformative power of redemption and the boundless reach of God's love. You can watch Pardoned by Grace on Salem Now, and when you purchase a copy of the DVD at salemnow.com, portions of that sale will be donated to Scott Heiberger's nonprofit prison organization, Behind the Wire Ministries, which provides hope and support to the incarcerated. Together, we can share the power of faith and forgiveness with those who need it most. So visit salemnow.com to purchase your DVD and donate to this incredible cause today. Man, there was so much news breaking last evening and this morning. It's absolutely insane. I'm not sure if you guys saw that Tucker gave this little, I don't want to call it a speech, Tucker Carlson I'm speaking of, but basically on Twitter, if you go on there, I've retweeted it. So check out my Twitter account, Carl Jackson Show on Twitter, where he kind of indicates where he might be going. It seems to me that he's probably going to be doing his own thing. That would be smart of him, in my opinion. He wants to talk about the big issues that many people aren't talking about. I think this is a win-win, again, for conservative media. I think it's bad news for Fox News. I think they've made a very, very, very bad decision in letting Tucker Carlson go. All right. Actually, I'm not going to talk too much about the other news because truthfully, I want to dive into this. So there was an article that popped up on amac.us, AMAC. They write fascinating columns, by the way, beyond just selling affordable health care, I believe, for the elderly. They write fantastic columns at that site. So either by choice or design, Biden might not finish his reelection race. We can look at Biden and just look at the guy where it looks like it's at times it's not feasible. It's not plausible for him to be able to continue his race. The guy looks like he is just spent. He is out of gas. He is totally done for. But the Democrat Party is going to continue to prop him up. Why? Because he's been a puppet for the radical left. And we talked about that yesterday. But if he doesn't if he doesn't become the president, let me just say this. Let me go back. Let me backtrack. If he doesn't finish the race, to the White House, again, I'm going to give you these 4 scenarios where he could usher Kamala Harris in. And again, either by choice or design, he might not finish the race. This might be the Democrats' intention for him not to finish the race. So here are the 4 scenarios. Democrats could replace Biden before he's sworn in for a second term. The first scenario is this. This would be if Biden drops out next year after most of the primaries, but before the Democrat convention in late August. That's scenario number 1, and I'm going to get into the details of these. The second scenario is Biden defeats all of the primary challengers. He becomes the nominee, all right, for the Democrat Party once again. Then he drops out before the general election in November. All right. The third scenario, if I can find it in my notes, would be, well, that's a lot farther along than I thought. The third scenario would be if Biden wins the general election, but drops out or is unable to continue before the electoral college votes were counted. And that's I think that's in December, sometime in mid to late December, if I recall correctly, for the electoral college votes. The fourth scenario, which would be the easiest scenario for Biden to usher Kamala Harris in to the White House, would be if Biden were unable to serve after a potential general election victory and after the electoral college votes were counted. In that case, he's then the president, and all that's left is the inauguration. In this case, the 20th Amendment would kick in, and then VP Harris could be sworn in as president. So these are the scenarios. How do they work out? How do they play out? Because this could happen. Guys, I didn't even think I would be talking about something like this. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, this is something I wouldn't have dreamed of talking about until this presidency. You guys may recall I didn't think this guy would last 6 months or a year max in the White House. I thought they intended to turn this thing over to Kamala Harris. I thought they were. I thought they would at maximum they would turn it over to her after the midterms, and that way she could finish up his term, and then she could potentially run again for 2 terms, 10 years. And they're looking at that again. That scenario could play out. So let's go through the scenarios. All right. Before I do, though, I want to talk to you about Birch Gold Group. You guys heard about this First Republic Bank, right? Doggone near collapsing. Guys, make sure you have something solid. Make sure you have something tangible, things that you can feel, things that you can store, even books, I would say. You want assets, all right? I think things are going to get pretty bad pretty quickly when it comes to the economy. I'm not hoping that, but it looks like we're headed that way. Biden is already talking about vetoing this legislation that has passed the House as of today to raise the debt ceiling $1.5 trillion, but to limit some of the spending and cut spending back to 2022 levels. It's passed in the House. Speaker Kevin McCarthy has done his job. He's tried to negotiate with Biden. Absolute crickets. Guys, you want some assets. You want something real. You want something that will endure. I want to talk to you about Birch Gold Group. Inflation has consequences as the Fed raises interest rates to combat out-of-control government spending. Long-term bonds have diminished in value, crippling banks. Depositors are holding their breath. That's what we're seeing at First Republic Bank now. And investors are bailing on bank stocks. Diversification has never been more important. The recent surge in gold prices is directly tied to the extreme market volatility that we're seeing right now. This is why gold has historically been a great hedge against the stock market and against inflation as well. The only company I trust to help you diversify into gold is Birch Gold Group. Text Carl to 9898 98 and you'll get a free info kit on gold. Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or your 401k that's tied to a volatile market into an IRA in physical precious metals. I'm talking about gold and silver. And the best part is it's tax sheltered. So text Carl, CARL, to 989898 and claim your free info kit on gold today. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers trust Burge Gold Group to protect their future, and you can too. Again, text Carl to 98 and 98 98 today. Okay, the number one scenario, the first scenario in which Kamala Harris or Biden could usher Kamala Harris into the White House is this. If Biden drops out next year, after most of the primaries, so most of the primaries, not all of them, but most of the primaries are completed, but before the actual Democrat convention in late August, he could set up a scenario where Kamala Harris could win the nomination. So even if Biden runs unopposed, he still has to participate in the formality of winning delegates. And I'm talking about running unopposed in the primary. So if he had no primary challengers, which he does, Marianne Williamson has already announced. You have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that has announced. I don't believe they'll have a major impact in the race. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe they will, just because of the power of incumbency that I talked about on yesterday's podcast. All right, so in the case that Biden wins, he needs 1,991 delegates to secure the nomination for the Democrats. If he gets those delegates, but then drops out and he's unable to continue before their convention, and when the candidates for each party are officially chosen by the votes of the delegates, so if he has to drop out, it would technically free up all of his delegates to vote for whomever they choose to vote for at the convention. Now, two things to note. All right. So it's not like the delegates will say, you know what? I really, Biden can't go on. I think I want Gavin Newsom. No, it doesn't work that way. I'm telling you, this guy could usher Kamala Harris into the White House. And I wouldn't be surprised if they have some type of deal going on, frankly. All right. So here's two things to note. These delegates can't just choose anybody. So they can't say, oh, Biden's not it. Ooh, let's make sure we get somebody that can beat Trump or DeSantis. Let's get a Gavin Newsom, because they think Gavin Newsom, is the greatest thing since sliced bread, despite the fact that he's absolutely destroyed California. But here's what would happen. Two things to remember. First, campaigns pick their own delegates. All right. So Biden's campaign would pick their own delegates being people. Second, the Democrat Party rules give campaigns effective veto power over their delegates. All right. So therefore, if Biden were to drop out before the convention in August, his campaign would have the power to control who all of his delegates vote for. Essentially, Biden would be able to handpick his own replacement as a Democrat nominee, all without any input from the Democrat voters, because they don't care about their voters anyway. So this is one scenario. And in all likelihood, let's be real, I think Biden would choose Kamala. I mean, for God's sakes, I talked about him moving the primary. He moved the South Carolina primary up. Why did he move the South Carolina primary up? Basically just foregoing the Iowa caucus because of the black vote. And Kamala Harris, as crappy as she is, as Larry Elder pointed out when he was on the Officer Tatum with me the other night, Kamala Harris does very well with black women. So they would have an advantage in South Carolina. The second scenario in which Biden could usher Kamala Harris in, or backdoor Kamala Harris into the White House, is this. He defeats all primary challengers. So instead of going through most of the primary and dropping out, he just wins. He wins it all out. All right. He defeats all primary challengers. If Gavin Newsom was to get in, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's in, Marianne Williamson, and anyone else. Bernie Sanders is out, by the way. You guys heard that. He's announced that he's not running, which tells you he's very happy with the socialist that's currently in the White House. All right. So that's the takeaway on that. Bernie Sanders is good. He's getting exactly what he wants. No need to run. All right. So the second scenario, again, Biden defeats all primary challengers. All right. Takes them all out. He's the nominee yet again, but he drops out before the general election. So he's between the convention, which is in August. The general election is in November. He wins the convention. He gets all the delegates that he needs. But now he drops out before actual election day. All right. So now let me give you some challenges to this. If he's unable to continue to the general election, in this case, there's 400 members of the DNC. All right. They would select a replacement candidate by majority vote. So the DNC 400 members would select a replacement candidate for Biden. But because many states allow early voting weeks out from an election, guess what will happen? It will likely be impossible to reprint ballots. So this means that Biden's name would still be on the ballots across all 50 states, and he would be at the top of the ticket. All right, so in any states that Biden wins, the Democrat Party would then have to count on the electors, right? The electors, which eventually would give him the electoral college points. So the electors assigned to him to vote for the party's chosen replacement when the electoral college ballots are officially cast in December of 2024. Now, this sets up a legal problem for Biden. This gets pretty thorny, all right? So in most states, electoral college electors who actually decide who becomes president. Many people don't know that, but they're the ones that actually decide who becomes president. They're not required to vote for the candidate who wins the popular vote. And thus, Biden electors could just cast their votes for Harris. Or at that point, they could choose any Democrat they want. But I think they would choose Harris. I don't think they would let Harris go that far to choose someone else. All right. So some states have laws in place that bind electors to the vote for the candidate who wins the popular vote. It is an open legal question whether electors in these states, according to the columnist, could change their vote if the winning candidate is unable to serve, meaning that court battles would ensue like crazy. All right. All right. Then there will be a legitimacy crisis. Carl, what do you mean by that? I'm glad you asked. This scenario would create a major legitimacy crisis if the Biden ticket wins the presidency, but Biden is no longer in the race. So if Biden wins the presidency, but he's no longer in the race, you can imagine a situation where a voter casts his or her ballot early for Biden, but and then when they find out, oh, wait a minute, I cast my ballot for Biden. I don't like Kamala Harris, but Kamala Harris is now going to be the president. They could potentially switch their vote to a Republican. They could say, I'd rather have a Republican than to have this dumb chick in. That could happen. So the first two scenarios would be an obvious giveaway that Biden set up the race. He intended to drop out all along, but he wanted to usher in Kamala Harris. Carl, why would he do that? Because he wouldn't have won were it not for James Clyburn. He wouldn't have won were it not for the black vote. And I think also this guy needs to run. He needs to run not only to set up Harris, but I think he needs to run to protect himself because the heat is coming to Hunter Biden. And this is the heat that the Democrat Party, I think, is willing to bring. Or these people, all of a sudden, people are talking about Hunter Biden. It's amazing how the left is finally discovering that Hunter Biden's laptop is actually real. It's amazing to me. But the heat is coming. And I think he's going to want to protect himself. He's going to want to protect his son. You know, there's stories being printed out there. I believe the New York Post that has talked about how Hunter Biden is held up in the White House, so he doesn't, so he's not served papers from his baby mama. That guy is talk about the dog poop underneath your shoe. That's what Hunter Biden is. All right. But the first two scenarios would be an obvious giveaway that Biden was only running to clear the field for Harris. All right. So that would be a clear giveaway. And frankly, that's the only way that she could win. She did horribly last time around. You guys remember Tulsi Gabbard finally gave the final kill shot in the debate, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. All right, lefties, metaphorically speaking. But the lady was just terrible. She was very unlikable. Called Biden a racist on stage. I wouldn't disagree with that, but called Biden a racist on stage. But the lady was unlikable. She didn't even last to the first primary Iowa caucus. She can't win. She can't win. The columnist goes on to say this: keeping Biden in the race just long enough to avoid a contested primary would also be a convenient way for the Democratic establishment to keep the radicals like Bernie Sanders out. They've already done that. Bernie Sanders knows the game. Bernie Sanders has already said he's not running. I think that says Bernie Sanders is happy with the process and what's going on. He sees that there are Marxists in the White House. Here's the third scenario. And we only got one more scenario after this. The third scenario would be if Biden wins the general election. So he wins the general election in November, but he drops out or is unable to continue before the Electoral College votes were counted in December. In this case, the process would be the same as it would be in the second scenario. All right, so it would be complete and utter chaos. The legitimacy would be questioned and all this kind of nonsense. It would be absolutely insane. The fourth scenario would be the easiest scenario, and that would be if Biden were unable to serve after the general election victory and after the Electoral College votes were counted. All right, so he gets past the general election, wins the general election, wins in November, or, it's Democrats, so it could last for however long they need it to last to get the votes that they need. But theoretically speaking, in November, all right, and then he wins the he gets all of the Electoral College votes that he needs. All of those Electoral College votes are counted. But before he either serves as president, or even if he gets past the Electoral College, but he doesn't get to January 20th where he's inaugurated, in this case, the vice president would be sworn in as president. So Biden can still run, right? And he is running. But the truth is he could drop out and he could usher Kamala Harris into the White House. So I've just given you 4 scenarios in which that could take place. Again, the first scenario would be if Biden drops out next year after most of the primaries, but before the Democrat convention in August of 2024. The second scenario is Biden defeats all the primary challengers, wins the primary outright, becomes the nominee yet again, but he drops out before the general election. The only problem is his name would still be on the ballot, and that would cause a little bit of chaos after the general election. But because his name would be on the top of the ticket. All right. And then the third scenario, you would basically have the same type of legitimacy crisis that you had in the second scenario. The third scenario would be if Biden wins the general election, but drops out or is unable to continue before the Electoral College votes were counted. All right. So that would be a difficult process as well, be a crazy process. But the fourth scenario is the clearer in all the scenarios. And that is if Biden were unable to serve after a potential general election victory and after he secured the Electoral College votes. In this case, the 20th Amendment is what would kick in, and the vice president-elect would be sworn in as president. And that is how you backdoor Kamala Harris into the White House, because Lord knows she wouldn't get there any other way. Guys, listen, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. It's easy to go to thecarljacksonshow.com, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Carl Jackson Show. Subscribe to our Rumble channel. Some of you prefer Rumble. I'm okay with that. The Carl Jackson Show. I'm on social media, all things social media. The Carl Jackson Show. Instagram, Twitter, Getter, Facebook, True Social. That's where you can find me. The Carl Jackson Show. I appreciate you guys tuning in. And until next time, do not grow weary doing good. God bless you.